Hey, it's me. I'm going live with no warning because I'm still in practice mode. But I thought what I could do is, I've drawn a lot of, real life Goths, people that live everyday lives and just go to school or the grocery store in their goth garbs. But I haven't drawn any of the what would you call it? The goth gods, the influences. So I thought, why not do that? And why not start with somebody who is probably the top of my list of, influences, Nick Cave. So I've got a picture here of I got a picture of Nick that I think is really special and I've never seen before today while I was digging around. So I'm gonna draw this one, and while I draw, I think I'm gonna tell you some stories about my sort of experiences with Nick Cave music and all of that. All right, let me get started here. All right, is it showing up? It's showing up. It's good. Okay, just double checking. If anybody's watching and the drawing stops updating, let me know because sometimes it does that. All right, so there it is. Okay. Mm-mm. Oh, I have background music. Gonna need that. Maybe it's already playing. Maybe not. Whatever. Okay, we don't need background music. So I was thinking back to when I first was made aware of Nick Cave. And was that was through a movie that was probably released in the early 90s called Johnny Suede. And for a long time, I was sort of obsessed with that movie. Um, I was, rockabilly culture, sure. I have played with that. Oops, that's too big. Um, it's the story. If you've never seen it, it's the story of this sort of rockabilly ish fantasy character played by not Johnny Depp, the other one. Who's that fucking guy? Do you know what's impossible is drawing and talking at the same time. Don't worry about who is played by. It's that guy who's Brad Pitt. Jeez Louise. Um, so he's played by Brad Pitt, and he's this sort of 50s, very clean cut, sort of pompadoured guy, and he finds these like magic shoes, basically, and then once he's got these shoes on, his life is complete, and it changes, his whole life. And I don't know, that just really stuck with a 25-year-old me. I just really 25, 20 maybe is when I first saw it. But there was something about like, oh, the fashion is gonna like change you and be magic or something. I don't know. Anyway, there's this scene where um, Brad Pitt's character is hanging out in this bar, and he meets his hero, who's this sort of almost like albino, pigment challenged fellow, and it's played by Nick Cave. And he's got this giant white pompadour, and he ends up sort of like scamming Johnny Suede out of some money a little bit and kind of takes advantage of it, takes advantage of him a little bit, you know. Anyway, the point is that was kind of it. Like, otherwise, he wasn't really on my radar in my youth. Um, until, let's see, cast your minds to like I don't know, I guess it was the early 2000s. I just started going to art school and I found solace in libraries. You know, I kind of had like a home life where I didn't necessarily want to be there a lot, I think, in retrospect. I didn't really notice that I was doing this at the time, but I was kind of looking for excuses to get out of the house. So I would go to the libraries a lot, and in the North Bay in Mill Valley, there was this great library that had like all the movies, and you could just go and get. You know, this was before Netflix was streaming and stuff, so you could just go. And I had like the list of top 100 movies of AFI. I'm kind of not making a lot of progress with this drawing. Sorry. Also, this doesn't look like him, but that's fine. That's okay. So I would go to this library and I would get like books to inspire my art and the things that I was drawing, and I would pick out movies and I would pick out CDs. And again, like I guess this was post Napster, which I fully took advantage of because I had like a job that didn't give me anything to do, so I ended up just like downloading music the whole time. Um, but at this point, really the only way I could discover new music for free is to just kind of see what's going on at the library and just, oh, well, this looks interesting, and I'd grab it. This is the worst. No, I'm not going to judge, but it's probably the worst thing I've ever drawn. Let's just go ahead and turn that off. Never speak of it again. No, maybe I'll come back to it. All right, so let's make sure that we're still updating with our drawing. Great. Okay. So one time I was at the library and I I found a CD of No More Shall We Part by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And it had like this cover that was very like hard to pin down as far as like what kind of music this even is. You know, a lot of times you can really judge by the cover what you're going to be getting. You know, is this a punk album? Is this um, orchestral? From the cover? It's very hard to tell, but I knew the name, Nick Cave. You know, from Johnny Suede and from people at art school talking about it, talking about the band and Nick. And hold on, just gotta concentrate on the eyes here. Can't talk and concentrate at the same time. Okay, so I grabbed it. And typical me, you know, I listened to it and I listened to it and I listened to it. Obviously, I copied it um, before sending it back, and then pretty much it was on full rotation for a long time. I can't even guess like maybe a year or more because I was mostly busy with art school. I couldn't really be goofing around with um, finding out more information about this new favorite album. I guess that's just me. I don't know. I'm sure most people would be like, I'm going to find out more about this guy. But I kind of would find an album that I liked and I would just listen to it and I wouldn't really worry about if there's anything else out there yet until I was like ready. And so that's what I did. I really just listened to this one album a lot. and kind of just guessed about what Nick Cave's background might be musically. I guessed that it was probably very punk or otherwise, post punk oriented, just because of the way he would kind of beat the piano up, just really kind of abuse the piano like somebody who wasn't classically trained to play piano, right? It was somebody who, just making sure that I'm recording my voice still. Okay. It sounded like somebody who was, when like a kid gets a hold of a piano and just like maybe they have a good sense of rhythm and they're kind of dunk, dunk and plunking around and abusing it. That's what it kind of sounded like to me. And I liked it. So I kind of just assumed that he was from that background, but I liked the mystery of just not worrying about it for a long time. Okay, where am I? And sure, eventually I started digging around and finding more albums and finding Grinder Man eventually, and that could I'll get back into that as the appropriate era in my life um, comes up, the Grinder Man era. But yeah, and I think what aside from just like musically, and what really has always done it for me is like the storytelling aspect of what he does lyrically. And I've since like through interviews or something, I've heard that he's said that he wishes he could just like write a cool, like, I don't know what he said, pop song or something that just is like musically catchy and not worrying about a story. And I think that was really inspiring to know that even like your hero has something that they perceive as faults and wishes that they could do their art differently. And it's like, are you crazy? That's the thing that I love most about what you do. And maybe everybody kind of has that, and you can kind of embrace your faults. You can embrace your faults and just understand that they're not really faults, they're what sets you apart. Your limitations kind of become who what your art is. Otherwise, there's a lot of emotionality to what Nick Cave, does, and there's songs that, especially on No More Shall We Part, that I would just like, for like Love Letter, I would just like, it was hard to play. I mean, even though I was playing that album all the time, it was like a hard experience to go through because I would probably at least get misty eyed, if not openly weeping in the car every time Love Letter came on. And it's hard when you're like considering, in retrospect, considering a breakup and thinking about all that heartache that goes with it. And then you're like projecting onto this song um, all this personal stuff, right? And that's going to come up again in these stories as well. What else did I want to say about this? So, okay, so if you haven't seen this photo before, then you have no idea. But this is going to be a drawing from a photo of Nick and his son Luke, taken in 1991. And there's, seeing parallels with fatherhood and stuff comes up later on too. We'll get into that later. As far as the drawing process, I think I've mentioned in other videos, maybe check out the one where I'm doing the guy from Pretty in Pink, Ducky. But what I've found and come to embrace is that the first stab at what I'm trying to do with my drawing is not going to look great. But what I've been trying to work with is like, how can I make that just keep the energy and the fun of it and not worry about it not being great and just kind of build on it anyway. So that's what I'm doing. And this is not going to be the final drawing. I'm going to go over it again. And I don't want to show you behind the curtain too much, but I'm working digitally right now. And so this is how I did my coloring book, where I would sketch pretty loosely digitally most of the time. That's no good. And then you can undo, you can resize things. There's something about like the level of commitment that you have to have when you're drawing traditionally with ink or whatever that is really helpful if you are an artist. And I encourage everybody to do that, no matter how much you love digital art, to always, do stuff in the sketchbook too and do stuff with ink, just because it kind of exercises the part of your brain that like needs to commit to the decisions in your drawing. And drawing is all about deciding anyway. Drawing, painting, whatever, you kind of just have to make a million decisions while you work, so you might as well like exercise that part of your brain that makes decisions on the fly. But especially when you're trying to tell stories from your life and stuff, yeah, maybe working digitally isn't so bad. And then when you're trying to do something like an illustration gig, something that needs to be done in a deadline, just take advantage of every tool that's out there. And that means digital is probably going to get you through that gig faster and with less frustration and with more tools and even fun at your disposal. It's good. So back to Nick Cave. Like I said, for the most part, oh, I'm starting to remember this entire period of my life in like the late aughts, right? The OOs. I was just listening to No More Shall We Part as far as Nick Cave's music, nothing else. Otherwise, I was doing a lot of weird Western art, so he's kind of part of that influence too, in a way. Like a lot of um, his songs, kind of. What is the one where it's like the story of this sort of bandito guy who is having an affair with the mayor's new wife. Oh my god, that's another one that just gives me chills listening to that story. Then he ends up killing this mayor. Do I have that story right? It was the mayor, right? And it's like very Mexican and Western. It's like the song version of a Sergio Leone movie. Um, okay, I'm going to take a second to shrink Nick here because I drew him too big to fit on the page. More. Okay, sorry about the head bobbing around. I got my reference up here on my pewter and I got to look at it a lot. Okay, so the point is, I was listening to just this one album and relating to a lot of the songs lyrically and the spirit of them. It almost feels like one sort of journey that one character is going through. That's kind of how I picture that album. It's not exactly as narrative as like a movie, but yeah, especially like emotionally, it just kind of goes through this arc with almost like kind of like the wall, where there's this point where it sounds like maybe this character is going a little nuts and it gets kind of frenetic, and then it kind of has a resolution and quiets down. And what is the point of this story? So then I got a divorce, And my life just completely changed, and I like really started over from nothing on life. And I think I also told this story in another video, but I don't want to give away the ending of this story by telling you which video to check out yet. Um, Once I was kind of on my own and just really had nothing but time in my free time to do whatever I wanted artistically, I was like, I'm gonna. His hand looks super weird. I was like, I'm gonna. I'd always been listening to, No More Shall We Part, and had pictured doing like a whole series of paintings based just on songs from that album. And then I thought, well, I probably should open it up. And so I started getting more albums. But I really had it in mind to, um, I really had it in mind to paint like a whole gallery show just from like the stuff that would appear in my head from listening to his songs and having listened to them off this one album so much. I really felt like I had a pretty strong idea of what I wanted them to look like and what would be going on in these paintings. Don't smoke, kids. Looks kind of cool in the drawing, though. This was in the 90s when people didn't know it was bad for you. Okay, so I was like, all right, I'm alone in this apartment. I want to paint these paintings based on Nick Cave songs. And one of the things that I related to in these songs is that he kind of has this almost recurring character of this raven haired beauty, and that's always been my type. And I've come to realize that it's probably because of Linda Carter and Wonder Woman, and probably not as original of a type to have in my generation as you'd think. Anyway, also maybe the Baroness from G.I. Joe. I remember playing G.I. Joe and having my figures and like looking down at the Baroness in that like vinyl outfit that she has and the Betty Page hair and just being like, and she's wearing like a corset. And I'm like, I like girls. Anyway, so he has this type that he clearly has as well. And he sings about this either recurring character or different people that he's known through his life that look like that. And I was like, well, I got to find somebody to model for these paintings who looks like that. And then, hey, wouldn't hurt to actually meet this sort of person as well. So I went on to this modeling site that I was a member of, where artists and photographers could connect with models and work with them, or flake out on each other, which is mostly what would happen. Before I draw his boy here, I think I'm going to make sure that his face is okay. All right, so I've decided that I'm going to do these. He looks mad there. He's not mad, he's just Nick Cave. I've decided that I'm going to do these paintings and I'm sketching them out, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to contact, somebody to model for this. So I went on the site and I contacted somebody who I had already kind of messaged back and forth with, because I used to run a drawing studio, and she was going to come and model live for all of us at this drawing studio. And that never worked out. So I had never met this young lady. I'll probably say girl at some point in these stories because that's just kind of I'm set in my ways. But she was a 29-year-old woman, not a girl. But that's good for now. That's fine. You want to leave some mystery while you're drawing and not work out everything beforehand. You got to keep it so that you can keep building up on it. So I contacted this young lady and she was into it, and so we decided to get together and talk about it. And I just had her come to my work Christmas party so that we could drink for free while we talk about the project. Well, short story, we just instantly hit it off. And oh, you know what I forgot to check? I forgot to check if anybody's watching this and if there's any comments, and I have no idea how to do that. So I apologize if you're commenting at me um, because I'm not seeing that right now. Well, anyway, we hit it off right away, and to be honest, she wasn't like an amazing Nick Cave fan at the moment. It turned out she said she was more into Tom Waits, which is also fine, but come on. Anyway, neither here nor there. She was great and beautiful and just like the funniest person I had ever met, basically. And we hit it off right away, and we started dating, and eventually we became exclusive. I mean, I think we were already always pretty much don't ask, don't tell, but I think we were always anyway. It was serious right away, and we moved in together, and then we got married, and then we had a kid, a boy. Yeah. So, whoa, sorry if that was loud. I hit the microphone. All right. So, all right. Drawing advice for a second. I've got Nick here standing in the grass. Got to kind of picture the perspective of what you're drawing and where people's feet land, which is extra fun with this one because in the photo, Luke's feet are cut off, but I think he's kind of out ahead of Nick a little bit. And maybe like his toes are there or down there somewhere. Okay. You know what I'm going to do is actually take this down. And he's got this great arc to him. I just want to make sure that I get that. Concentrating for a moment. Man, this is what it's like to have what a 2-year-old looks like. Always a squirm worm, always squirming around. Something like that. I think it's actually more severe of an angle. So there's a lot of back and forth with my head right now as I draw because I think when I'm doing my first stab, I mostly look at the photo and try not to worry too much about what's going on the page, just so I can kind of drink it in, you know. Almost there. All right, so her name was Amanda, and we are still happily together. And she has since come to understand how amazing Nick Cave is. And let's get into that for a second. Specifically, okay, I had done some of these paintings now at this point in the story. Not really as many as I ever intended because I had some other issues that we could get into another time, but really was kind of flaky about stuff and flighty about my projects. So I did some of the paintings that I wanted intended to do, but not really a lot of them. And some of them just really didn't turn out the way I still kind of picture, but that's the way it goes. You know, you just make what you make, and then that's its own thing. You can't go back and Lucas out on stuff, and you gotta just let it belong to the world once you made it. Anyway, so one of the paintings was inspired by the song Hallelujah. Not the one that was in not the one that was in Shrek, but the other Hallelujah from No More Shall We Part, where there's like imagery of no, I'm totally wrong song. No, that is the song. Okay, so but there's this imagery, and I think I got confused because I never really painted this part of it. I wanted to do a painting with the girls carrying buckets of tears and burying them, and just great imagery in that song. But the part of the song that I drew was about writer's block, where this character that Nick is sort of singing about is this sort of, I picture like an ailing, aging writer or musician, and maybe he's kind of singing about himself. I don't know, but I just drew my son's hair instead of this kid's hair. Um, it was about like the piano's teeth are bared, and the typewriter sits in the corner, mute as a tomb, and just great imagery. So I think I skipped the typewriter, and I just painted this piano that was like evil and alive and gnashing its teeth, the keys, right? And basically in this empty room. And then I pulled one of the tricks that Mike Mignola taught me, not personally, but where when you have like a lonely scene where there's no people, you can still kind of make it less lonely by including, well, he'd usually have statues, but or paintings, and so I had this painting of this woman who was, modeled after Amanda loosely. So that way you kind of still have a figure in your painting, even though there's no people. And then it was basically like blank, dripping walls. So then Vice had this contest where you could try to make your own version of a Nick Cave album. Drawing kids is really hard because you have to sort of simplify or they get creepy looking. And I'm talking more than drawing, so it's a little creepy looking. All right, so they had this contest where you would imagine your own version of a Nick Cave album cover. So I already had that artwork, and I think this is a recurring theme where when you already have something around the house that you've done and didn't really necessarily take full advantage of the art, and you can kind of repurpose it, why not? So I'm drawing a toddler, which is so hard. All right. Oh, you know what? It's fine because I don't want this guy to be all realistic looking. And sometimes I change style out of nowhere, and it's just because I'm not really thinking about it, just trying to feel my way through. But he's kind of too realistic looking. Okay, let's start over there. All right, so they got this contest running, and I'm like, I got this painting. It's got this negative space basically with the wall. I put the titles for No More Shall We Part and Nick Cave, all the text, you know. Well, it's gonna have to do for now, I guess. Kids don't really have eyebrows. Like you gotta kind of look for them, depending on ethnicity, I suppose. But um, kids kind of just can start off. Caucasian kids can start off kind of more blonder um, than when they get older. So their eyebrows are like barely there. But he kind of looks kind of making a little mean mug. That's weird. Anyway, I was one of the winners. There was a handful of people who were picked with their album design, and I got one of the prizes, which was a concert for, tickets for two to go see his next concert in San Francisco at the Warfield. Come on. Anybody else miss that kind of stuff? I mean, I feel kind of lame that the last time he came through there, I didn't go because we were raising a baby and 2.5 hours away now. But he looks kind of. Oh, I think he's sticking out his tongue. Sometimes when you're working with photos, the details aren't that detailed, and so this is what I learned making the coloring book: is you gotta either notice what details going on and sort of exaggerate it, or you have to just invent your own details from the blobs that you see in the photos. You have to just decide again what is going on in this picture while he's sticking out his tongue. So I'm just going to make sure that it's obvious that he's sticking out his tongue. I think that's okay for now. So we went and I squeezed Nick Cave's toe. So that was exciting. That was a no. If you've ever been to one of his concerts, we were right up front, in the pit or whatever, and he is all about, um, pre-pandemic was all about, um, just full contact with people in the audience and really being kind of part of their experience, and not shy about like contact. So he would kind of climb out onto people and like half crowd surf without like fully jumping in or anything. He'd kind of just step on people. He'd step on people. So he stepped on the guy right in front of me, and this, I assume, amazing, Italian shoe, purple maybe, I don't know, was like right there with like the big squared off toe, and I was just like, I had to squeeze Nick Cave's toe. Couldn't help it. Um, that brings up all kinds of other stories about fandom and stuff. But anyway, the other thing that I noticed at this concert, that we both noticed, um, was energy. Do you believe in like auras and like energy? You know how like in Street Fighter when they'd be like Nugan and like some ball of that person's will and life force would shoot out of that person and impact. Jesus, I gotta stop doing that. It would just like impact the, Guile or whoever. That happened, and I'm not like a metaphysical, believer or anything. I'm not religious, but I swear to God, he. Why is it all thick all of a sudden? Sorry, I'm having pencil troubles. Nick Cave was performing one of his more energetic songs, and he would do this move sometimes when he's performing. He will like arch back like a werewolf braying at the moon, you know, and just be like, "Da!" and just like howling to the sky with his arms thrown back, and like probably not Michael Jackson up on the toes, but it felt like he was kind of doing that. I'm not sure. But I swear to God, this wave of energy just like sexual energy just shot out of him and rippled past all of us in the audience. And I swear to God, it wasn't just me. Amanda felt it too. And I could just tell. I think that part of that energy is everybody in this real space, which is why like Zoom and live streaming doesn't really work that way. But there's something about everybody being in that room together and having that experience together. It like was like ripples in a pond through everybody. I've never seen anything before or since like that. Let's make sure this is still recording. Okay. Um. So that happened. That was amazing. Are there any other stories about that concert? I don't think so. That was the tour where he had the children's choir with them, and they would like kind of purposefully do all the clean songs first with the choir out there. I think that was the tour. Saw him twice plus the Grinder Man, but it was nice that they would kind of do all the clean songs first and then send the kids off to go celebrate and have some sparkling apple cider while he does the rest of the songs about murder and stuff. This is looking a little weird because I'm noticing in the photo that the Luke's pant leg one is wider than the other somehow, but we'll see if I keep that. Oh, I see. I see. Okay, now more stories. Okay, one of the other paintings that I did was kind of the main image that I had in mind for having Amanda model. And I'm awful with song titles, but the line that struck me that I wanted to paint was the lines that they led you to lay their muzzles in your lap, the dogs that they fed you to. How's it go? Oh, the other way around. The dogs that they led to you will lay their muzzles in your lap. The lions that they fed you to lie down and take a nap. Something like that. Scary beasts who turn out to not be scary and are actually subservient to this woman that he's singing to. And I just thought that was so cool. And I just pictured like, this woman in this garden, and there's these frightening beasts that have all sort of become subservient to her, this queen of nature or something. And so that never really got painted until this is looking a little weird. He's probably, this is shadowy, so he's stepping back. I think it's okay, except I'm going to cheat here, and there is no cheating. As long as you come up with the image that you want and you didn't rip it off of somebody else, I don't know if there's really any cheating. I've stopped trying to prove I'm Michelangelo. So I hadn't done that painting, and it was still, when you're an artist and you have things in mind that you want to do. Each one is like a baby almost, where it's you mourn it if it never comes to be in a way. So I was invited to be in a group show that was themed after um, tarot cards, which I didn't know anything about. So I looked up like the meaning of some various tarot cards, and I was kind of fishing for something that could fit into one of these Nick Cave paintings that I wanted to do. And there was one, what was it called? I don't think it was a Queen of Spades. It was something like that, though. I'm, if you don't use it, you lose it. I already forgot what that one was called, but it was this card about um, not being afraid of nature and things going on. I'm not even 100% sure anymore, to be honest. It was years ago, but I was like, this is my opportunity. I'm going to kind of shoehorn this idea into the painting of Amanda being surrounded by beasts laying their muzzles in her lap and whatever. For some reason, I ended up painting it not like that at all. I did these great. The photo shoot was probably better. I did this great photo shoot with her where we went to a dog park and all the dogs came to her, and there were giant Great Danes who were cozying up to her. So the reference stuff was great, but for some reason when I painted it, it ended up being like her walking down this rocky path, and like Armageddon is happening behind her with fiery trees that have been like struck by lightning or something, and all these wolves and lions are kind of chasing alongside her, like more energy and things going on in the scene. What is on his sweater? It's like little dog bones or something. Again, not sure what the detail is. I'm just going to say that they're dog bones. Doesn't have to be beautifully rendered, but just needs to be specific what it is that you're drawing. Almost looks more like mushroom clouds. That's weird. So, it came out okay, this painting. It was okay. And we had a lot of fun at the opening, a lot of fun at these, the days of yore at these art openings and nightclubs and everything. Being a young couple in love in San Francisco. So that was great, and it was worth just painting it was worth it just for that. I think I'm going to turn these into little dogs. I don't know. However, now those look like some kind of nipple flaps. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Gotta make sure to give things a fresh eye and make sure they don't look like something you didn't intend. Okay, what if there was like just one puppy right here? Okay. Oh, and then maybe he's got an L on his jacket. Is that weird? Like Laverne. 70s reference. Okay, so the thing about this painting, though, I'll try to find an image. Maybe in post production, I'll put it up. Um, I used these watercolors that are called Dr. Martens, not to be confused with the shoes, Dr. Martens dyes. And I was in love with using those dyes for all kinds of stuff, usually on clayboard like this piece was. And clayboard is like a scratch board that doesn't have the ink on it, so you can put the ink on it or color and then scratch it off. That might make a good video at some point. Got about 11 minutes, so maybe I'll try to wrap this up. All right, so what I do is I lock this layer so I don't accidentally draw on it, and then I make a new one, and we never speak of that first one again. And then, actually, smoke look a little better. Okay. So the thing about these dyes is they're not light fast. So that means that they fade. They fade sometimes very quickly. Like one time I did a painting and I did like a wet into wet effect in this painting, and I put it outside to dry in the sun for like an hour, and that was a huge mistake. It just totally stripped the color out of the whole painting. But usually it's like more of a slow process with these paintings. So now, if you look at the painting, it looks pretty weird, especially in the face. I think I was never happy with her face either. And the more you go, if you're like unhappy with a part of your drawing or painting and you keep going over it, it's just going to look worse and worse. It's better to start over like I did with this one. But since I'm happy with this pencil drawing, I'm going to unlock it again because I forgot to turn this down with the opacity and then lock it. Okay. Are we still recording my drawing? Yeah. Okay. So that painting doesn't look too good. That's a shame. But you know what? I don't care too much because I had shoehorned it into this idea with the cards, the tarot cards. And it just wasn't that first painting that I wanted to do anyway. So maybe we still have time to do that when my son goes off to college. Okay, classic comics nib. Let's go to black and make this bigger. Black. Oh, what's going on? I need a new layer? No? What's happening? Yes, need a new layer. Okay. There it is. That's huge. Also huge. That might work. Okay, so the other Nick Cave story in my that parallels my life but doesn't is we all have our own experiences, of course, but having a son, right? Um, Nick has had four sons, and Luke here, I believe, is doing fine, but one of his sons um, is no longer with us. And I think everybody's, heart goes out to him. And if you haven't experienced that, then there's just no way of relating, really. Um, but I think if you have a kid, you can relate on some level because having a kid means signing off to that vulnerability. It just means that is something that is within the possibilities of what could happen in your life, and that sucks. It sucks, but it sucks because having a kid is so great. Um, so yeah, when have you remember the movie Dune? Um, I'm sure it was in the books too, but it's been a long time on the books for me. I don't remember. But in the movie, there's the Harkonnens would install heart plugs on people, right? And it was like everybody had this installed vulnerability and nobody could get around that on this planet. If you were on the planet Harkonnen, you had a heart plug, which meant that who um, didn't, anybody who is, what is the word, cruel enough or impulsive enough or accident prone could just reach over and rip out your heart. And that's what it feels like to be a parent. It means that you have had a heart plug installed, and anybody cruel or careless or an accident, whatever, can rip your heart out at any time. And that's just how you live the rest of your life. So I can't imagine. And one time I was drawing alone at a brewery because I was trying to get away from my son and family to try to get some work done, ironically. And Amanda and I both work from home, and sometimes it's most of the time it's pretty impossible. Um, it's weird. His eyebrow in the photo is slanted, but I think that's just like the curvature of his forehead. So I'm gonna try to not make him look all like some kind of Chucky or something. Um, so I had escaped off to this brewery to try to get some drawing done and to have a micro brew, a Hefeweizen. Hefeweizen. I don't know. I still don't. People argue about it. I don't care. He still looks angry. So I had put on the Nick Cave channel on Pandora, and I'm not great with song titles, but I think the song is called "Where Do We Go Now But Nowhere," and it's about this it's like from it's obviously recorded before the accident, but it's a song about somebody losing a child, and it's about like being a loving couple and like sexy and like that romance of um, being a new couple. And I don't know if they're like on vacation in the song, but they're like in this, yeah, they must be something along those lines, because it's about being like in this colonial hotel and having these like sexy times. Not to get too colorful with the lyrics, but if you know the song, you know what I'm talking about. And he's sort of harkening back to that time, and then he's harkening back, whoo, harkening back to having this kid, and I lost it. I just pictured like that possibility in my life, and had to go run off to the bathroom. And I don't think I've really ever told anybody that except my wife. I think I forgot to even tell my therapist, but there it is on YouTube Live if anybody's watching it. Luckily, probably not. But you know what? There's nothing to be ashamed about being a grown man who fucking wept openly in a men's room. Who hasn't, you know? But it was also a learning moment because um, I've heard it said about like alcoholism that it doesn't matter how many drinks you have, and I think that sounds odd to anybody hearing it, whether they drink or not. What matters is does it have a negative effect? Is it really affecting your life negatively? You know, everybody can have experiences with being hungover or an embarrassing moment or whatever. Not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like a pattern or more instances than you're willing to be okay with, where things uh, get in the way of your life. And so I've never really drank a lot. How's this look from afar here? So I never considered that a possibility, you know. But the fact is, one beer, two beers in a night, even just a couple times a week, was enough where it kind of had now had a track record of causing problems for me. Things that I wish hadn't gone on in my life. And, you know, I mean, I'm still getting misty eyed thinking about this song and the situation now. So obviously you can't just blame it on beer, but you know, having two beers and then just losing it in the men's room at the microbrew, it didn't help. So um, this last, it's been a year. Last New Year's, I was like, I don't think I want to drink anymore. So we still go to the brewery sometimes when it's open. And my wife will have a beer and maybe I'll taste it. But honestly, you know, it's like I don't think it's enough to be like, oh, you've awakened the beast, but it doesn't really help to taste it. Smelling it is probably enough to be like, ah, yes, memories. But even tasting it doesn't help. All right, we've just passed an hour, so I'm going to try to finish inking this and talk a little less. That was the last story I had in mind to bring up anyway. Um, so I don't know. I think it's just interesting to think about the times when my love of Nick Cave and his music and his acting, right? All of it has just sort of influenced my life, and I'm thankful for it. You know what? That brings up one more story that I had teased earlier about fandom and what level of fandom are you up for? Um, because I was thinking about earlier, I was thinking about this time when I was being a fan of another thing. Do we still have this? Is this still recording? Yes. Okay. I went to go see Chris Ware and sorry if I make clacky noises with my mouth and you have like sound sensory issues like I do. I hate that noise, but I also get dry mouth when I talk too much. So what are you going to do? Anyway, I went to this presentation with, oh, I don't know. It was either Chris Ware and Charles Burns, or I think it might have been Charles Burns and um, Daniel Clowes, and the Chris Ware was another time. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, I went with a group of friends from the Bay Area, and these friends were all on various paths of their artistic journeys, just like I am. I think I'm going to stop looking at the photos just to make this my own, right? And okay, so these friends, I don't want to name any names because this isn't necessarily complimentary to them, but I don't really hang out with them anymore. And most of these friends, nothing specific against them as to why we don't hang out, just our lives aren't what they used to be, and we dropped contact. But they are the kind of artist friends who, yeah, they might be on the cover of a magazine or have definitely have articles written about them, you know. And that's who I was hanging out with. I don't have any articles about me, and I've never been featured in magazines, and for a long time that really bothered me, to be honest. And now I just feel so much better not caring. I don't like that. Okay. So after the presentation, Charles Burns and Dan Clowes did a little signing, right? And you know, these kind of things are like an excuse to sell their new book and to shake some hands, you know, make some fans happy. Uh, well, I was like, I'm gonna buy a book and get it signed, you know. And these friends kind of got cooler than thou on me, you know. Um, they said something to the effect of like they didn't want to get in line, and they're like, we're just gonna hold out and meet these two in like a professional setting where we can all hang out together as equals is pretty much what they said. But go ahead and do your little signing, you know. And all right, so I did, and I still stand by that. You know why? Because maybe they'll meet and hang out with Daniel Clowes someday. Maybe they won't. Maybe they already have. I don't keep up with what they're doing anymore. Um, but if they had stood in line and gotten a book signed, right? Would they hang out with Dan Clowes someday and he'd be like, wait a minute, I recognize you. You're that lowlife who stood in line to get a signed book. I recognize that face. Right? Like, what difference does it make? And you know what else? I'm fans of all kinds of creators and comics and comedians. I mean, cartoonists, musicians, and I'll take whatever contact comes my way. I don't worry about if it's like if it's like uncool to just be a fan. I think about like Sarah Silverman, Conan O'Brien, like they have podcasts now, and I like just monologuing and not drawing very much. Sorry. I like just getting to know them through the podcast. That's fine. I don't need to be best friends with everybody that I'm a fan of. I'll take whatever level of getting to know them that I can get, really. Um, anyway, that was my geek out story. I'm hungry. It's like you don't want to like eat and get all bloated before one of these things, but probably should have something. If I don't have background music, I apologize because it could come in handy right now. Do I have any? Okay, bonus story. Bonus fan. I was planning on putting all the fan geek out meeting your hero stories in different singular videos, but since we're on the subject, I've met a lot of heroes. I've made videos about meeting some of them, and I plan on making more. But here's another one because it probably doesn't need to be its own video. Um, Pretty big Devo fan, and I think they're not really on my rotation much right now, but um, just in general. And I went through a pretty big Devo phase. This is fine for now. He needs one more foot. And at the height of my Devo fandom phase, it's kind of when I was still in art school, and I was listening to a lot of stuff. And Devo was one of these bands where there's a lot of stuff from like the 80s, including like Nick Cave, where I kind of discovered them later in life and just kind of as I came upon them, went through the back catalog. And for a long time, I definitely knew of Devo and, of course, knew Whip It. But for a long time, the only album I had was their Easy Listening, which is going to come up later in the story. See how I teased that? Same thing. I just had one album that I enjoyed often, and I didn't dig further into the catalog for whatever reason. And so I would just listen to the Easy Listening album. I think I'm going to leave this not black. Okay. As a matter of fact, that doesn't need to be there. Okay, so my friend Josh works at Super 7, and he used to work at the store in Haight Ashbury. No, it wasn't Haight Ashbury. It was in Japantown back then. So I would go and visit him a lot in Japantown at the store. And then one time, I think at this point, I had graduated and moved off to Sacramento, but Mark Mothersbaugh had an art show at Super 7. And it was an art show. It wasn't about the music. It wasn't about Devo. He does like sort of photo collages and doodles and, just kind of almost like outsider art in a way. That's fine. So I was like, well, I got to go to that. So I drove out from Sacramento, probably listening to Devo, easy listening the whole time. No, by that point I was a super fan and I had all their stuff, but I liked the early hardcore kind of stuff and the sort of pre-drum machine music. And I liked this easy listening. I like having a lot of stuff where you can, have something playing without lyrics, because a lot of times you need to like conceptualize or write, and it's really hard when there's lyrics going. So I have a good collection of stuff that has no lyrics. Anyway, that's one of them. I get out to Super 7, and it's a pretty small store, and there was really just a decent amount of fans hanging out, checking out the art, being cool. When it's a gallery show, even if you're geeking out on the person, you really have to like be cool and not run up and try to get selfies or whatever. However, there was this guy who was maybe my age, maybe a little, I think maybe he was a little older. And he was one of these guys who was just like fully living the punk lifestyle at like 49 or whatever he was. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But he had like a giant mohawk and he was, I think, maybe on something. He seemed like he was maybe on speed, or maybe he just was like super manic. I don't know. Can't armchair diagnose him, but he was really on top of Mark Mothersbaugh. Like physically, getting in his space a lot and wanting to talk to him more than, you're kind of supposed to let these people mingle through the crowd and chill out sometimes, but he was kind of monopolizing Mark, wanting to get multiple pictures. And at one point he even leaned over and did a photo where he was like strangling Mark Mothersbaugh. And I noticed that, and I was like, oh, geez, he looks super uncomfortable. And I'm just guessing that Mark Mothersbaugh doesn't have like that super magnetic party guy personality anyway. So I think this guy was really pushing him out way outside of his comfort zone. He was probably outside of his comfort zone, maybe even just doing an art show. I don't know. And yes, I noticed, but I still had to like sidle up and try to talk to him literally as he was leaving the place. He had kind of walked out of the venue and was kind of making his way, out of the situation. And I was like, well, I can't not talk to Mark Mothersbaugh, right? So I was like, hey, before you take off, I just want to say hi and shake your hand and blah, blah, blah. And let's see here. What am I trying to do? Okay. And so Mark shakes my hand and he makes a joke. He's like, oh, I'm glad you made it. And I'm glad you found parking. And I'm like, huh? And I look behind me and he's pointing to like a giant, like methed out RV that was parked across the street. Good joke. You know what? I've learned I've learned social skills a little better since this happened, but I at the time didn't realize this was like a good way to like leave them laughing, leave them wanting more. That's the interaction. Let it go, right? No, I needed to continue talking to Mark Mothersbaugh after he had just been strangled by an aging punk. And I was like, hey, I noticed the music in there was more of the, um, easy listening style stuff. That was really cool. Where can I get a hold of that? Because there was a lot of stuff that I had never heard. He literally reaches over, grabs like his publicist agent kind of guy, and puts this man in between him and me. And now I'm like face to face with this publicist dude, and he like mumbles something about the easy listening to him, and the guy goes, "Oh, so it's a double album, and you can get it on the Mugado website or whatever it is." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." Felt feeling really stupid. And real talk, I held on to that for a while. Um, I felt what wronged or slighted or I don't know what. I didn't feel the warm feelings that I once did toward Devo in general. And you know what? That's not fair. I understand that, and it's just how I felt for a while because now I had these attached memories, and I think that that's probably why there's the cliche of don't meet your heroes because you can hold on to whatever it means to you, whatever they mean to you, you can hold on to that until you meet them, and then maybe you might have other experiences that you are going to hold on to and think about, and you've lost that hero now. So that's not fair to either one of you. So, you know, understand that meeting your heroes is always a risk. That's all. That's all. Okay. 10 minutes. I'm really done in 10 minutes. That's an hour and a half. That's not too bad for one of these live things, right? It's not like we have anywhere to go these days. Um, so let's see. One more story about things not going well. And then this one, I think I'll just skip saying the name. And if I ever do take up drinking again and we're talking over beers, you can ask, and I'll happily tell you all about who this was. But it's not even probably as bad of a story as the Mark Mothers boss, so don't get your hopes up. But um, right after I graduated art school, I got a job working for one of my biggest heroes, and I went to school in San Francisco at the Academy of Art, which maybe that'll be its own video of should you go to art school. I think that's a good thing to go over at some point. But anyway, everybody there that was in my programs, they wanted to go graduate and work for Disney, Nickelodeon, Pixar. That was their life plan. And I think for me, I had this juxtapose magazine fed fantasy of being, I was in an animation program. It was like animation slash illustration kind of a program that I had signed up for. And I had this, it almost looks like he has a goiter, so I'm just trying to slim this up a little bit. Okay. I had this sort of fantasy that I was going to graduate and be like one of these ex animators turned, fine artists in the galleries or whatever. And Juxtapose would feature a lot of these kind of cats in the magazine, and I was like, that's what I want. I was interested more in the gallery side at that point. So it's weird, but I guess I figured if I went to school for animation, maybe I could get a job in animation once I'm out. Maybe I'll just make my own path and get into galleries or something. I was undecided. Turns out I did kind of go that way and get into gallery work, which is different than working in an animation studio because you don't make any money. But anyway, my first job out of school was working for, indirectly working under one of these main heroes of mine. And I just was like starstruck from afar. It's like I never got to speak with him. He worked in a different city, but he would like send artwork and I would take it from there to do stuff like graphic design wise with it. And at one point I got like an email from him that was like encouraging me with my work and sort of saying like at some point it'll be cool for us all to like sit at a table together and come up with ideas together. In retrospect on this video, by the way, I think next time I'll start with the face so that you don't have to sit through an hour and a half to see Nick Cave's face get drawn, but oh well. So the point is, like I said, had problems with like being a flake back then. And I had this job and it was a really cool entry level job to have, but it was also really stressful. And I think I was probably only there for like 6 weeks, maybe, if that. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. Until I had a vacation that I already had planned before getting hired to go to a wedding in Singapore. And I was really bad at communication. I think I've also mentioned this in previous videos that I was really bad at communicating, especially when I had like bad news to give somebody, right? If I was afraid of somebody's reaction to bad news or that they might take it as bad news, I just wouldn't tell them and wait for them to kind of figure it out in due time. It's just not the way to go. It's as far as learning to be a grown up, always better to just put something out there if it's the truth and let it um, get the reaction it's going to get. And you don't have to be a jerk about it, but it's better to tell people stuff. So I failed to tell this company that I had booked a vacation and flights were paid for and hotels and all that, and I was not willing to give it up for this job. And I think they hired me because they were in a rush to get stuff done and they needed the help. And here I was kind of bailing to go on this vacation. Get his forehead right. Nick's got a very distinctive forehead, so I want to kind of get that. Well, when I came back from Singapore and whatever, I didn't have a job anymore. I got the phone call that was like, I think we can handle things from here. And I think when I was younger like that, I think I got laid off a lot of times like that, where I would put on my work history that I had been laid off, but maybe they were just telling me that I had been laid off. So then, I went to Comic Con. It was my first year at Comic Con, and I wasn't exhibiting. I was just checking it out and trying to talk to people like the comic book companies and the animation companies and trying to get a job, which you hear that would happen sometimes at these conventions. I'd never seen it happen. Let's check with a different pen for a while. Get some detail in here a little bit. Whoa! Too big. Anyway, so I was talking to Nickelodeon again and talking to Marvel again and doing all that kind of stuff. And I came by the booth for this company that I had worked for and gotten laid off from. And kind of got like some, yeah, it was always an okay conversation with some backhanded compliments at the same time when I was talking to this guy that ran the company. But it was fine. And kind of at one point he goes, "Oh, your hero artist guy is in the booth next door right now. You should go say hi." I had never met him, so I was like, "Okay." And I walked next to the next, what is it, next door to the next booth, and I say, "Hey, my name is Ben. I briefly worked for you." Come to think of it, maybe he did know exactly who I was and didn't care to meet me because he was like, "Okay, cool," and then turned around and started packing up boxes or whatever. And that was the end of that interaction. Growing up, I've come to realize that like this kind of stuff, either he maybe had like social skill issues that I didn't understand, or he was having a bad day and he wanted to leave because Comic Con is exhausting, or he was a dick. I have no idea. Or maybe he did, recognize my name. I doubt it. But maybe he was like, "Oh, that's that guy that flaked off to Asia." It doesn't really matter, like, it doesn't matter. Um, is there another point to this story besides that it doesn't matter that sometimes you meet a hero and it's not the interaction that you were looking for? No, that's it. I'm not prepping you to someday meet me and I'll be a dick. Is it okay to say dick on YouTube? Is that all right? Am I going to be not worthy of advertisers? I'll be able to check on that. All right, well, we're at 1:30, so I'm just going to bust through the last of this hand here real quick. And that's going to be it, because there's no way that anybody is going to be hanging around for the rest of this, right? You always pick out the stuff and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this. This is going to be a quick one. I think his son is doing that thing where like he's kind of holding on to his sweater over his thumb, which is pretty funny. Try to get that in there. It's so impossible to hold a 2-year-old's hand. You'd think that they're small and you could do it, but they're just always fighting to be free, and they don't even understand that there's cars and weirdos and everybody else out there. But he'll probably be fine. But always trying to squirm away from you. That's the rest of my life. Well, what do you think of long form Let's Draw Goths live? Um, I'd be curious if you watch any portion of this, what you think. Because to be honest, it's not too bad for me. Better than editing. Don't smoke, kids. I think one of the big struggles when you're learning to draw is balancing what things feel like versus what they actually look like, or even what you think that they look like. You know, especially eyes. That's gonna have to be maybe I'll do some kind of lesson later. But people really kind of go wrong when they're trying to draw an eye because they know like how they're constructed and they know where a pupil is, and and then they're outlining. They're like making outlines of highlights and stuff. Super weird. That's gonna have to be its own thing sometime. That smoke I would make thinner if I had it to do over again. Let's see here. What could we do quickly for some brush back here? I missed part of his leg. Okay. Well, again, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you do all the YouTube stuff, like the likes and the subscribes and everything. If there's something specific that you want to see in a live video, be sure to let me know in a comment, because I'm kind of just figuring it out as I go, and as far as what the subject matter is, whether it should be instructional or more about like relationships and emotions and mental health. I'm up for talking about any of it. And I know that not all artists or YouTubers or whoever is doing these videos are up for getting real about stuff like that. So if that's more interesting to you, then be sure to let me know. If that's boring and you'd rather just know how to draw eyeballs, you should let me know that too, because I really don't know. So like one of the things with drawing is having a center of interest, and it's still a Nick Cave illustration. So um, it's about fatherhood, right? And it's about him and his boy here. But I want you to see Nick first. So that's why I didn't fill in Luke's jeans with black. Let's see what happens if I try to do some quick. Oh, you know what? There's a cross hatching brush that I could use real quick. Perhaps, right? Yeah. This is cool. That looks nuts. Well, I'll have to experiment with that. I'm not sure. No, I'm not going to do that. Okay. Never mind. No, this. Okay, so center of interest. Trying to keep the darkest spot Nick here, which is the easiest way to have a center of interest. Of course, the other way to have a good center of interest is having like a lot of detail somewhere else, which is what's happening here, but I don't know, whatever. Just loosey goosey. And that's why, even though in the photo the tree is black, but I'm not going to do black. I'm going to do, it's kind of got these weeping willow swampy vines coming off of it, and then I'm just going to keep it kind of wispy and light so that it fades back into the background, hopefully. And that's it. I think I'm just going to leave it kind of impressionistic beyond that. And now I'm definitely going too far. That's why I love the undo. What could we do to quickly, minimally put some kind of. You know what it is? I don't think I like this tree at all. Well, I don't know. Guess what? When you're seeing this live, you find out it's a lot more indecisive than you'd think with stuff. Kind of figure it out, and then you kind of leave it as best as you can, and maybe you go back and Lucas out on it after all. Who knows? Do you know what I'm talking about when I talk about Lucasing out? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, you could be young enough to not even have been around and going to movies when Lucas did his um, the prequels. Right before he did the prequels, he did these like reimaginings of the first three movies that he had made, right? With Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and all the original gang. Um, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. That's fine. Anyway, so he put out his original movies, and he would go and tinker with all the movies, and each one, like Star Wars, oh, I'm just gonna fix this explosion. I was never happy with the way this, Death Star exploded. I was never really happy with what happened in the cantina. Um, and so he would tinker, and then Jedi, it's more tinkered with, right? Um, and then wait, Empire Strikes Back, more tinkered with. I don't remember specifically. I think he messed with like the monster that comes out of the cave, and swallows up the Millennium Falcon. Anyway, by the time he got to the third movie, he was like adding whole scenes that were just in CG, and it was getting kind of nuts. So that, I think, is a temptation that all creatives go through, and I'm of the opinion that you have to resist. And I'm not saying I've never done it. I've totally gone back and fixed. I don't know if I've ever. Oh yes, I've fixed paintings that shouldn't have been picked. Shouldn't have been fixed. Um, and oh my God, I'm at an hour 40. People don't even watch movies this long. All right, I gotta stop. Well, let's get back into Lucasing out in another video. Since nobody's watching this anyway, I think we'll just do that. All right, and I'm going to sign this.